have I got a story for you guys this week?
Jews tell stories? Never know that Jews tell stories.
I'm gonna be presumptuous here, Rabbi, and say this is gonna be one of your top 10, maybe 5 favorite Jew stories.
Oh boy,
ever.
A high bar.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite stories of my entire life.
Okay.
Is this going to be the story that, like I spoke about your story and without knowing who this is?
I think so.
Next thing's Jay is right.
No, this is
way beyond.
It's beyond for sure. So last week I was traveling out to see a client, and I had an early morning flight, and when I landed, I was going right from the airport to the client site. And so I was worried I wasn't going to have time to wrap tefillin. So I had a layover in Detroit. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to I had a couple hours. So I said, I'm just going to find a spot in the terminal, and I'm just going to wrap tefillin there. So I wrapped in the terminal, and I had my yarmulke on. I finished up, I put everything away, and I had my yarmulke on. I said, you know what, I'm going to leave the yarmulke on. So I left. Like that. So yeah, why not? So I left it on. So now I board my plane, and I have status, so I board early, and so I'm sitting.
Dream. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there with my yarmulke on, and out of nowhere, this kid walks up to me, and he's probably, I'm guessing like his probably mid-20s, something like that. I think probably Middle Eastern descent, but probably American. He doesn't have an accent. And he walks up to me, hands me a business card, and he says, "Would you please email me? I want to talk to you about something."
What? Okay.
And I said, okay. I said, okay. So I'm just, I'm looking at the card or whatever. And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. Sure. And a minute later, it comes back to me and says, he says, what I want to talk to you about is I've been wanting to start up a small business, and I want some business tips. So if you could email me, I'm going to get some business advice from you.
No, because he knew that you were a business consultant.
Well, I think it was the I think it was the yarmulke.
No, it wasn't the yarmulke. It was, he just knew Jay works for this business consulting firm, and he just saw it on his nose. God. I can't believe it.
I was.
Oh my God!
And did you email
I
him?
was. You know what? I lost his card. I'm actually really bummed. I'm really bummed about it. Yes, I wanted to email him. I cannot. I don't know if I stuck it in the seat back pocket or what I did, but I can't find it anywhere.
Anti-Semitism. How do we feel about this?
I don't think it's anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is an idea of hating Jews. This is pro-Semitism. I would call this proto-Semite. He's very impressed with a Jew. He thinks Jews are good with a buck. What's wrong with that?
It was. I was like, if this is stereotyping, then I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that.
I have a few follow-up questions. Have you ever walked in public with the yarmulke before?
No.
Okay, so your first time with the yarmulke, 5 minutes in, you get approached for business advice.
I don't get it.
Oh my God.
Literally 69 years, I'm walking with a yarmulke on my head. I've been to hundreds of terminals, flying everywhere. Never once did a guy come over to me with a business card and said, "I want your business advice."
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because Jay doesn't look like an Orthodox rabbi or threatening. You look intimidating and Orthodox. Like, he would probably not ask an Orthodox looking person.
Yeah.
But when he saw Jay, he's like, "Oh, here I go. Here's my chance."
Here's a guy that's not Orthodox, but he's Jewish. He wants to know.
At first, when he handed me the card at first, I was thinking, maybe he has run some like organization that like gets like Middle Eastern Jewish people together to do like some like kumbaya stuff or
Just too bad you lost the card, because I would have loved to know who he was.
I have to dig it up. Maybe it's my travel bag somewhere. I really want to find it.
That's so
that is
that was
That's a hilarious story.
I couldn't believe within an hour of wearing a yarmulke in public. I was profiled, Rabbi.
You were profiled. Did you pull it off right away? Were you like, never mind, I'm not wearing?
Did you take the yarmulke off immediately afterwards?
No. I wore for the flight, and then
That is so funny. Your travel last week. I had another funny story because you met someone who I grew up with at your.
Yes.
Yes. That's so funny. Yes. It's just a small Jewish world. That's all.
Yes, for listeners. So actually, but there'll be other people listening to this. So I guess I'll tell a story.
That's true.
So at it's not just us. It looks like it, but it's not. It's a good point. It might be. So on my business trip, there was another consultancy we were working with. And I was talking to ChayaLeah about the recording this week and just talking about what we want to talk about or whatever. And I said, I was joking around. I said, there's a guy at this other consultancy we're working with who has a super Jewy name. You must know him. And I told her, and she's like, oh yeah, I do. Yeah, it was a joke. And she's like, oh no, I do know him.
No, that is funny.
It's such a small world.
Oh my God. It was
on the topic of yarmulkes.
Yeah.
There's a short story about I had a friend years ago that was turning Orthodox. I mean, and he started to do everything. I mean, he was kosher and he was davening every day, Shomer Shabbos. But the one thing he just couldn't do was put on a yarmulke at work. And he was a doctor.
Right.
And then, like, it was one holiday, I think it was maybe Simchas Torah. We both got a little drunk. And I said to him, you know what? Come on, it's Simchas Torah. Make a commitment that, right away after Simchas Torah, you're going to put on a yarmulke. And, he was a little drunk. And he said, okay, right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Look, I'm already religious. Why am I so afraid of putting on a yarmulke? And he worked at a Catholic hospital. And he came in the day after Simchas Torah with a yarmulke. The first one to greet him was the Catholic,
the priest.
The priest who's the chaplain, the Catholic chaplain,
okay.
And said, Doc, it's about time.
Oh,
okay.
That's good.
We were all wondering when this is going to happen.
Oh.
I mean, you do everything else, but the yarmulkes, and the chaplain said, it's about time.
That's so funny.
So that's the opposite.
But there is something about
the opposite.
Yeah, there is something about yarmulkes. So, like when I walk around with the boys, or like, I mean, I've said this before, I think on the podcast. Like, I am much more aware of like people looking at us, because we do stick out more. I could kind of blend in without a guy around me who wears yarmulke.
Right.
So it's interesting. But that's so funny. So anyway, okay. We are going to talk about Passover this week because it's coming up in a couple weeks. And we do have 2 other episodes, by the way, if you're interested, from last year where we covered a lot of different topics about Passover. So you could go back. Yeah, a lot of details about the logistics of Pesach, and we could talk about some of those if we want again, but go back and listen to those old episodes because we covered a lot of ground on them. So today we'll have a conversation about everyone's favorite Jewish holiday, the most attended Jewish event of the year.
Still,
right?
You think?
I think the Passover Seder is still the most attended Jewish event. And it's going to be here before we know it. It's like I've seen so many memes this week of like the day of Purim coming to an end and everybody getting like nauseous thinking about the fact that Passover is 30 days from Purim. So if you do Passover the way they do it in the Orthodox world, there's what to be nervous about right now, unless you're going to a very fancy hotel where you're just going to show up with your suitcase and be taken care of for 9 days. Otherwise, you don't have to worry. Then you don't have to worry, which many people do, and good for them. I'm not jealous at all. So happy for them.
Oh, that's a thing?
Oh, it's huge business. Huge
really?
Business. Huge. It's got to be at least 35, 40 programs around the world.
Yeah.
Easy.
It's $1 billion business.
Oh,
now.
Yeah, for sure now. For sure.
Yeah. Really?
I mean, you close up your house. You don't do a thing. You say goodbye. You check into this hotel. And everything is taken care of for you. Everything. Every meal. And the meals are not just regular meals. No. I mean, depending upon the program. But there are some like 5-star programs that kill you. That literally kill you with all different types of novelty types of food that we don't eat on Pesach. It's all kosher for Passover.
Yeah.
But it's like literally pizza.
Wow.
They make kosher for Passover pizza.
They make kosher for Passover pizza. They make muffins.
Can you tell what we're jealous of? Listen to us. No, we know all the menus. Name a hotel. We know all the menus.
You know, some people dream about a white Christmas. We dream about a Pesach hotel.
That's right.
I'm dreaming of a Pesach hotel where everything is given to you.
Oh.
So are these at normal hotels whose kitchens are kashrut?
At some places they take over the whole hotel.
Yeah.
If there's a big program like with 500, 700 people or 1,000 people, they'll take over the whole hotel. They'll kasher the kitchen and they'll just run the program, throughout the week.
Yeah.
It's a huge business. Huge.
Wow. I have a lot of friends
there's cruises, kosher for Passover cruises.
I have friends going to Cyprus this year, the country.
Yeah.
And people go to all over Europe, and they're all over. There's some in China. They had last year. I know friends went to Shanghai.
I wouldn't go there.
I wouldn't either, but people did. But all over this country, and it's always fancy hotels. It's almost always not.
I mean, this is very expensive.
It's very expensive.
I can imagine.
Probably at a high end program, at least maybe $10,000 per person.
Yeah,
holy
per person.
Moly.
You're talking about $1,000 a day for you. So imagine if you're a family of 5, it's $50,000.
Yeah.
But there are people that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on these programs.
Yeah.
I mean, they say if you go to this program, you're never going to do Passover again. If you can afford it, you'll never do Passover again.
Here's an idea. If you've got like a lazy young Jew, have them help ChayaLeah prep for Passover once, and they're going to say, "I got to make enough money to get one of these $10,000 a night hotels when I have a family because there's no way I'm doing that."
Forget it.
It's true.
Forget it.
It's funny that you're saying that because I hear my kids talk about it a lot. Because it is. I mean, they help a lot at home, and Pesach. We spoke about it last year, but it's a lot of work.
Kids have a lot of fun on Pesach.
No, we do. We do have fun, but they talk about it. They would love to go to a hotel. Are you kidding? Why not? We went one night.
I tell you,
we went one night, and they were serving. It was a barbecue night. We went because my brother-in-law was staying at a hotel with his family, so we went to visit them. And I mean, they were serving ribeye steaks and fresh made French fries, and it's like all these Orthodox Jews, literally 500-600 of them, lining up. I mean, it's not my style because you have to stand in line a lot for food, which I cannot. There's nothing I like less than standing in line at a buffet. But the food was really good.
No, the food is good, really but you have to be willing to go into like the Seder in a room of 800 people.
Oh my God! I just had an idea. I just had an idea. We could next year. Let's market that we'll bring edJEWcation to one of the hotels because they bring a lot of Jewish entertainment who get to go for free. We should say we'll do edJEWcation at the program
if they give us a free program.
Yeah,
and you know what they'll say? Thank you very much. Let me think about this. Maybe Shlomi Nallison will do it.
Yeah,
this banter. This banter is worth at least a couple grand a night, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
By that, you guys are you're not optimistic. By then, we're going to be so big. Our podcast, they're going to be begging us.
I do get invited every year by Shlomi to come to the program, but I've never been able to take advantage of it. Maybe next year, once the shul is up and running. And Levi's running it. Maybe I will take advantage of it. Yeah. But again, I've been to a cruise. So I know what it's like eating with all these a lot of people. It's just not my style.
Yeah.
I mean, I love being with the family, but on the other hand, if it saves my wife, all this heartache of cleaning and cooking and all of that stuff,
Yeah. When I'm peeling my 75th potato on the day before, I'll be like, I would be very happy to go to a program right now.
I mean,
where my friends are sitting at the pool.
What?
Yes,
you peel potatoes?
Yeah. No, who do you think does it?
I don't know.
My 7 dwarves?
No, you have 4 sons. I thought they peeled the potatoes.
They're definitely not peeling the potatoes.
Well, you know the story of the guy in the Middle Ages? You know that story about there's a guy, Poland was once run, it was a very powerful country during the Middle Ages, and it was run by these poritzes, these governors that each had a certain territory called a guberna.
Right.
And each guberna usually had a manager that was a Jewish guy by the name of Moshe. And they called the moshka.
Yeah.
So every poritz, every governor, Polish governor had a moshka that ran his business affairs. because just like Jay's opened up this discussion, so it was Jay's great-great-great-great-grandfather somewhere in Poland, a mushka that was riding in a wagon one day, and the poet saw his yarmulke and said, "Hey, come and run my business." So he used to run his business. Business was going very well. Anyways, as we know, Poland is a very Catholic country. During the Middle Ages, the Jews had a very difficult time with the Roman Catholic Church, especially since some of the priests were extremely anti-Semitic and the bishops were anti-Semitic. It just happened to be that the new bishop that moved into this gubernia was one of these anti-Semitic things and didn't like the fact that the governor was very close to this Jew Moshka. So he worked on him day after day, telling him it's just not right. You have a Jewish guy working for you, and this is a Catholic country. How dare you have a guy? No. Either you get rid of him or he has to convert. So the Poritz is unhappy about this, but the priest works on him over and over and over again. Finally, he relents. He calls in Moshe and he says, "Hey, Moshe, listen, I hate to say this to you, but I'm going to have to ask you to please convert to Catholicism because, like the bishop is harassing me. So do me a favor and do that, and we're still going to be good friends." Moshe is brokenhearted. He goes home and his wife, Sarah, and he goes to Sarah. He said, "Sarah, I've got some bad news. The Poritz is pressuring me now into converting to Catholicism, and that's what we're just going to have to do if I want to keep my position and not cause any difficulties." So unfortunately, they convert to Catholicism. But now, as a Catholic, he kind of loses his whole mojo. His mojo is gone. And the business is now going down, and quarter after quarter, the Poritz sees we're down 10%, they're down 12%. So he calls him in and says, "Moshe, what's going on?" He says, "I'll tell you, since I'm a Catholic, my mojo is gone. I just don't have the same inspiration." He says, "Forget it. I want you to go back being Jews. I don't care what the bishop says, but go back to being Jew. Let's go."
Right.
So he's thrilled. "Thank you so much, so much." He runs home with the great news. He throws open the door. Sarah, come here quickly. I got some exciting news." She comes down. He says, "Sarah, the Poritz today rescinded his decree of us being Catholics. He said to me, you could go back being Jewish. Isn't that great news?" She gives him a cold stare. He goes, "Sarah, this is what we wanted, didn't we?" She says, "Couldn't you wait till after Pesach to tell me this?" Why are you telling me this now, like a week before Pesach? Okay? That kind of sums up the attitude of cleaning for Pesach.
That's great.
That's funny.
That's so funny.
That's funny.
Okay, let me ask a serious question. So, Pesach, we know about Passover. It's all about freedom. We talk about it all the time. It's such a central concept in Judaism. Every single Shabbat, we mention it. Every time we make a blessing at a Jewish life cycle event, we talk about the Exodus from Egypt. Why is that? Why is the story of the Exodus from Egypt the ultimate story that defines who we are as a Jewish nation?
Because it's interesting. You use the word freedom. Freedom is a misunderstood word.
Right.
See, people think that freedom, as we define it in America, is emancipation. Freedom from slavery, freedom from doing things. The freedom that we're talking about, the story of Passover, has nothing to do with emancipation. Yes, the Jews were slaves to Pharaoh, but the idea that God took them out of Egypt was not to make them free in the sense of when we have fought a civil war to make the African Americans free. Right. This is not what freedom is. Freedom is the ability to live as your destiny demands. That's what freedom is all about, to give you the opportunity to live the fullest sense of Judaism that you can. And since they were not able to do that in Egypt, that's what we're celebrating. We're not celebrating the fact that they had to build towers. So they worked there, and when they went to Israel, they became farmers. You think farmers worked any less than they were as slaves? They worked. Everybody. You always work hard. What happened was when God first came to Moses and said, "I want you to go down to Pharaoh, and I want you to give him this message: Shalach esami v'yavduni. I want you to let my people go so they may serve me." See, people remember the clause, "Let my people go,"
right?
Because that's common in America. Yeah. Because what we think of freedom is like we think of countries like communism and dictatorships and fascism. This is not what God was interested in. He wanted to take the people out of Egypt to form a nation that would be subservient and loyal to him and they would worship him. So they didn't have the freedom to do whatever they wanted.
Right.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Torah, it's the furthest thing from freedom. I want to do whatever I want. No, you can't. I want to eat anything I want. No, you can't. I want to work No, you can't. There's a lot of restrictions within Judaism, but the restrictions in Judaism are there in order for us to be able to live the most holy, meaningful, life that we can. And that's why the story of Pesach is so very important, to us, because it made us into a nation that's what we become, like Mamlechas Kainim, a nation of priests and a holy nation, and a nation that carries God's water to the world and his message to the world. That's what freedom is all about. And the only freedom, as it says in the ethics of our sages, that the only true freedom is through the Torah. Because every time that we think about, if you're not going to be dedicated to the Torah and the Torah gives you your values, and that you chase values somewhere else, you're going to be a slave to those values. Whether it's going to be power, whether that's going to be money, whether that's going to be beauty, whatever you're going to be chasing, that you're a slave to that kind of an ideology. The only time when we are truly free is when we feel that we are connected to the Torah, and the Torah gives us the ability to live our life fullest and allows us to really perform the mission that we here are on earth, and that's to make God's garden, God's home.
It's interesting. There's have you ever heard of a guy named Jocko Willink?
Yes.
Jocko?
So Jocko Willink, he's a retired Navy SEAL, and he has a really popular podcast now, where it's pretty much like a military history podcast, but he also does some like motivational stuff. And one of his sayings is discipline equals freedom. And it's the whole idea that the only way you can actually be free to do what you want in your life is by setting up a structure and just being free to do whatever it is you want to do. You're never going to achieve anything. You're not actually free. That you need to be disciplined and have the guardrail set up for yourself to actually achieve what you want to achieve in life. And that's freedom.
That's absolutely true.
Really
there used to be a movement, like, the hippie movement in the 60s, where the idea of freedom is give up everything.
Right.
Well, if you give up everything, you have nothing to lose. Like, the song, Me and Bobby McGee, freedom is the ability to do nothing. I have nothing else to lose. No, that means you have nothing to lose. That means you're not free. You're a slave to your nothingness.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
That's what freedom is identified there as. I mean, and you see that it didn't last very long. I mean, because this movement dissipated quite quickly. But that's where people get the notion of freedom wrong. Freedom is not the ability to do anything you want. But where do we learn what freedom is from? Is from our Constitution. We're free to assembly, and we're free to this. But real freedom is the ability to live your fullest life.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Constitution, because I've been thinking about something that's actually not really related to Pesach, but to this idea of freedom. And it's related to what's happening right now on the campuses, and the fact that they arrested this guy at Columbia, and they're talking about deporting him. And there's a whole controversy around if this is a free speech issue and if not. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking about it, because it's very, related to what I do professionally, but also as a Jew, I'm thinking about what's worse for us, right? As the Jewish people, like, is it better that we have this guy running around, saying all these bad, sharing bad ideas and perpetuating bad ideas, while also I very much believe in the First Amendment right to free speech. But what happens when we're in a democracy, a liberal democracy, and then there's very dangerous ideas being spread and the institutions capture them? Like, I feel like Judaism does a better job of having guardrails around these kinds of things, where we don't have that in the West. Like, I don't want to stifle someone's speech, but also we have to deal with the fact that these people are spreading terrible lies, and in some cases it leads to violence and all of this kind of stuff. So how do you reorient your concept of freedom when you don't have guardrails the way we have in Jewish law? I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm asking you.
Are you asking about how Judaism would look at this issue?
Yeah.
So first of all, this particular issue, there are rules and regulations, there's laws that govern. If this guy, at the end of the day, he's suing in court, he's going to have his day in court, and if he violated American law, then they have reason to deport him. I think as Jews, we should believe very much in the ability to have the First Amendment and freedom of speech. I think it's very important to have freedom of speech, because even though there's going to be times when things are going to be said that we don't like, then listen, that's what a democracy is. I mean, there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't like. It's not only speech. So that's but there are also rules. I mean, you cannot, free speech is not always free. You can't scream fire. I mean, the Supreme Court has defined what free speech means, and then he has to go through the process, and whatever happens. In Judaism, there's no such thing as free speech. I mean,
that's what I was asking.
There's no concept of free speech. You can't libel anybody. You can't speak lashon hara. You can't slander anybody. You can't give a false report against anybody. So if you say something is a lie, you have transgressed on a sin.
Right.
If I say I saw Jay doing X, Y, and Z, then that's a sin. I don't have the freedom to say that. So Judaism doesn't come into concept. This whole idea of concept of free speech within Judaism doesn't exist.
That goes back to your original point, that the way we think about freedom is not what the story of the Exodus is about at all.
Sure.
It is not related.
This is not an emancipation story. This is not and Moses is not Abraham Lincoln. I mean, that's, we think of him as, coming and he's freeing the Jews and he's taking them out, and and then we're splitting the sea, and now we're finally free. This is not what it's about. Yes, we weren't servants to Pharaoh anymore, and that is true, and we weren't being abused by Pharaoh anymore or oppressed by Pharaoh anymore. But now we have God, who's our boss. So we've substituted, one master for another master. We still have a master, and his name is God. And God is a very exacting master, and he's a very compelling and demanding master. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you look through the story in the Bible, the Jews couldn't always meet his standards. 40 days after Moses came down, they worshipped a golden calf. So he's a very demanding. God wants us to live a good life, and insists upon following 613 commandments. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Then that controlled how you speak, how you eat, how you pray, where you go, who you marry. I mean, it's a lot. So we got out of Egypt. We're not slaves to Pharaoh anymore, but we certainly have a master over us. Yeah. And that's the Almighty.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because coming back to ChayaLeah's point, is in biblical terms, when the Israelites were freed from Egypt, they had a new master, right? Which was God. But in today's day and age, and this was written about early on in America, is that, and I think it was, I can't remember who said it. I can't remember who said it, but someone wrote that America's sort of its core, its systems of belief are upheld by the fact that it's a good moral country,
right?
And so while our system of government isn't inherently doesn't inherently respond to God, it really only works with a moral people who have some sense of a belief system that guides them towards, truth and justice. Yeah. And if you don't have those core values in your society, then then your freedom is like it's like a weapon.
Yeah.
Any weapon can be used for good or for ill.
That's a really good point.
And if you don't have your moral bearings, then it'll be used for ill. And so it's not that much different necessarily than the Jews being freed from Egypt. It's just that then they kind of saw the direct connection between God and their freedom.
Right.
We don't necessarily see that direct connection today, but it's no less important.
Yeah, I agree with you. The only things that I would say is, here in the United States of America, we've kind of lived off the energy of the early revolutionaries. I mean, they set into place this Constitution and the amendments, and we've kind of lived off of that pretty much through the 18th century and 19th, and then into the 20th century. Going into the 21st century, I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, I think that our values are changing.
Right.
I mean, we're not anymore that moral, the city on the hill kind of standard where President Reagan, envisioned us as being the light unto the nations, and this is the United States and its greatness, and we always try to do the right thing. I think the 21st century is challenging us. And I'm not sure that the makeup of the American people is the same as it was back in the early 19th century.
Right.
And those morals that they held affirmed, like everybody has a right and all of this. I don't know if we're seeing the end of the American empire here in this century, where we're afraid of, we used to be able to fight moral wars. And we were not afraid of saying the right thing. We were not afraid of doing the right thing. Today, I think Americans are afraid. I think Americans are scared. They're scared of their shadows. They're scared of their place in the world. They don't find themselves in the same position where we were like after World War II. We rebuilt Europe.
Yeah.
We literally rebuilt Europe. We didn't demand anything of them.
Japan.
We didn't say anything of them.
Yeah.
We did it. We went. Vietnam, I think, was a major turning point in our history, the war in Vietnam. And that really sent shock tremors through us. That was this really a moral war? We lost 58,000 young men. For what?
Right.
For what? And so I'm not so sure that, I want to believe and I want to be confident and I'd like to think that we have a great future ahead of us, but I'm not as sure as I would be 40 years ago or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that depressing
note.
No, I'm just kidding.
Only because
we got into
because
this.
what Jay was saying is that in the United States you have to make that choice.
Right.
In Judaism, you don't have to make that choice.
Right.
Judaism, that choice has been made for you.
Right.
This is what's demanded of you. Now, you may choose to opt out.
Right.
And that's your business. So we have different streams of Judaism. Reform is not the same as Orthodox. Orthodox is not the same as Reform.
Right.
You have choices here. In America, you have to make that choice to be a moral and ethical person. You have to make that choice that we are going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
That's very different.
One of the things that keeps coming up over this, also because of like current events and what's going on in Israel, is that so many Jews chose not to leave Egypt, right? And we don't really spend a lot of time ever thinking about it.
That's not in the Bible?
It's
by the way.
So what I know. It's in the Medrash, right?
Yeah, it's in the Medrash.
So could you talk a little? I mean, do you know anything about it?
No, I know nothing about it. Never heard about it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, good. So I could say whatever I want. I can make it up, and it will be like, okay.
Think about it. Think about it. In reality, let's just say tomorrow Mashiach comes here to the United States.
Okay.
And he proclaims that he's the Messiah, and he's here to fulfill the prophecy of ancient prophets that we are all going to, gather together and go back to Israel and reestablish a commonwealth, with a Beis Hamikdash and whatever. Are American Jews going?
Right.
You see that Jew that's living in Malibu in a 52,000 square foot mansion, two people in a 50,000 square foot mansion saying, Mashiach is saying, well, you're not going to live in a 52,000 square foot mansion. You're going to Akko, and you're going to live next door to a Yemenite family with 9 kids. Okay? So this guy is going to say to himself, okay, I'm giving up my mansion on the water, and I'm going to Akko. Do you see American Jewry following this person?
I don't know.
I mean, why would they?
Right.
Why would they? Now, you have the religious people who are going to say, okay, if you're Mashiach, then, okay, let's go. But the vast majority of Americans, the majority of American Jews are not Orthodox.
Yeah.
The majority of American Jews are secular. They're going to look at this person and they're going to say, okay, show us a sign. So he's going to do a miracle. Let's say this guy could even pull off a miracle. He's going to make the Angels win the World Series. The Angels are going to win the World Series, and they win the World Series. A miracle happens. You know what happens after that? For 2 minutes, we're excited. Hey, good. And then we go back to being regular. You see, when the problem is that when Joseph invited his family to come live with him, what he should have done was, in my No, I'm not saying this. In my opinion, is say, hey, as long as I'm here, stay here.
Right.
But if I'm not here, go back.
Right.
Go back to Israel. You're not going to do well here. What's the first thing the Torah tells us? They came, they prolificated, they bought land, they bought homes, they settled. They settled. They became Egyptian.
Right.
They became Egyptian. So you're talking about over 200 years living in Egypt. What do you think?
Yeah.
So Moses comes. He performs all these miracles. That's wonderful. That's great. Bottom line is he's asking you to join him to go into the desert.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Okay, so are we ready to do that? No, some were. 600,000 people were. But and according to the Medrash, many of them were not willing. Right. Especially if the plagues didn't affect them.
Right.
I mean, if the plagues didn't affect you, I mean, imagine if America said today, everyone is getting a 15% increase in taxes except the Jews.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to pay $10 for eggs except the Jews only have to pay $2.
Right.
The Jews don't have to pay for any airline tickets. You just go to the airport and you board first. That would be my dream.
That would be heaven.
You board first, doesn't cost you a penny. Would we ever leave here? Would we ever leave? So there in Egypt, the wild beasts are running through the Egyptians' home. I'm sitting and barbecuing. Okay? Right. I'm having the time of my life. They're being hit with pestilence, boils, lice, whoever knows what else they're being hit. And I'm enjoying my life. Right. I'm not working anymore. Slavery ended when Moses came. After a while, Moses came. So it was dark for the Egyptians, but it was light for the Jews. Once it was light for the Jews, why am I leaving?
Why bother?
Yeah, right. Why am I leaving?
Right.
So two questions about that. Number one is, are there estimates as to how many Israelites were in Egypt?
Well, ChayaLeah, you brought down the Medrash, which says Chamushim, only 20% left.
Right.
So if you think only 20%.
Oh, only 20% left.
It's only 20% left. I mean, it's a staggering number because 600,000 is only men between the ages of 20 and 60. If then you take the elderly, you take women, the kids, children. You take women, talking about maybe 3 million. If 3 million is 20%, then how many is that?
Yeah, 600,000.
You're talking about tens of. But
yeah. 3 million. Oh, 3 million is 20%. Yeah,
3 million is 20%.
They're talking about 15 million.
15 million Jews.
That's so weird because that's how many Jews there are now.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
15 million Jews.
Wow.
Are there always just 15 million Jews?
That's about it.
Druze. Druze. The Druze who live in the north of Israel and southern Syria. They believe that there are 100,000 Druze souls that exist, or million. Sorry. I think 1 million Druze souls exist in the world. And when someone dies, someone else is born and you can't have more or less or whatever. So maybe there's just always, maybe we've uncovered something that nobody ever uncovered before.
There's always 15 million.
That there's always 15 million Jews.
Maybe.
I'm just saying.
That could be. You'd have to go through history.
I know.
All right. The other random question I have is, were there any Jews at the time living outside of Egypt?
That is a
good question. We don't have any record. At least I don't have any record.
There
were Jews that tried to leave Egypt beforehand. We say there were, before Moses took them out and they fought a war with the Philistines on the way up to Israel. And that's why God didn't want to take them up through that path, through what we would call Gaza, literally up, into Israel. God didn't want because their corpses were still there. So there were Jews that may have left Egypt earlier than the majority, but we don't have really any records of Jews living in other places in the world.
There are some archaeological findings in Southern Europe, mainly in the area of Greece and a little bit even into Rome and a little in Turkey, of depictions of what they think are Jews on coins and a couple of other things, little hieroglyphics that they found that they think somehow either maybe because of business or travel that those areas had.
But this are you talking about 3,500 years ago?
At the time of the Egyptian.
Yeah, they were probably small business consultants.
Exactly.
They're walking around with turbans.
Yeah.
There are a few, not many, but there are a few findings because there's not much archaeological evidence of Jews in Egypt at that time to begin with, and even of the Exodus. There's a few little things, but It's not something that there's a lot of evidence for.
Right.
It's in our heart and in our memory.
Right.
No, because you would think that, if we spent 40 years in the desert, you would find something.
Yeah.
A shoe, something, a shirt.
It is very
someone
ancient.
threw out a shaitel, something that,
It is very ancient. Weren't you the one, Jay, who said that, like, I don't know if you told me this, that we're closer in time to Cleopatra than Cleopatra is to the pyramids. Like, that's how ancient the pyramids are.
Oh, it was something like that. Yeah. It was something like that.
Which is, I think of Cleopatra like sitting next to the pyramids while they're being built. But when you think about the perspective of history, it's
you say you would find like a shoe or something, but think about this was what do you say this was 5,000 years ago?
No, 30. Well, we're 30. We're 57, 85 minus 2448. Yeah. So they got it in 2448.
Okay.
Make the calculations.
It's a few thousand years.
So a few thousand. So there's a lot of sand in that desert. There's a lot of sand. There's a lot of sand, and that sand is pretty deep. So it probably covers up a lot of stuff.
It would be nice, but you know what? There's something about it. Like, it would be nice to find. My students always ask me this. Like, wouldn't it help our faith if we could like find evidence of the 10 plagues or the splitting of the sea or the mountain that the Torah was given? But the whole point of faith is that you don't need evidence, right? You're supposed to. I mean, it's nice. We want it because we're logical, rational beings. But part of faith is like accepting these things happening without having that kind of scientific evidence.
Speaking of that, did you see that article? I meant to bring this up today. I totally forgot. Did you see that article that they think they found Noah's Ark?
Yeah, I saw that article.
When was that?
Yeah,
in Turkey, I think. Yeah. Right?
Well, it would be Turkey. Yeah. That makes sense.
I've seen that before. Actually, there's a good documentary about it. There's a good documentary about it. What were you going to say about it?
I was going to say, but there are stories outside of the biblical story that kind of corroborates the story of Exodus, with a war and a person coming, so there are outside, but is it enough to give it, 100%, proof that this is exactly what happened here? I don't think so.
Right.
I think it boils down to faith.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, the story has lasted for 3,500 years.
Right, I know. I was just going to say, I said this last year, but Jonathan Sachs always said that like there's a difference between history and memory, right? History is an event that happened that you can prove and that there's evidence. Right. Memory is a story that happened to you, right? It's something that's in your collective conscience. That's what it is. And we've passed down that memory for generations and it became our story. This isn't something that happened to our ancestors. We tell the story of Passover like it happened to us last year, and it's just a remarkable thing.
He writes it.
Well, and you think about the fact that it wasn't that long ago that a lot of people thought the entire Bible was myth. Right. But now we know from archaeology, we know David existed. We know the Solomon existed. Yeah. Like we found coins with, their images on them. So at some point we know that the Bible is not just myth for sure, just based on archaeology. So, who knows how far back it goes, but when, you can prove it or not prove it, but we know it's not all myth. We know for sure some parts of it are history.
Now, again, he writes at the end of the History of the Jews, Paul Johnson, that the Jews were so convinced that they were a major player in history that they wrote themselves into and possibly became. If you keep saying it over and over, it's maybe it is providential, maybe it's not providential, but you inserted yourself till it became real. And that's the way it is.
I have a question that's off this topic, but about Pesach. So last year we did quite a bit about the Haggadah and what we say at the Seder, because for those who maybe haven't listened, just briefly, the way we celebrate Passover outside of Israel, we spent the first 2 nights, we have a Seder. In Israel, it's 1 night, but you sit down, you retell the story of the Exodus, and there's multiple steps and different activities that we do. So I wanted to just ask about one particular paragraph because it doesn't fit in with the rest. There's a part after we open the door for Elijah to come in, which is towards the end of the Seder. There's a paragraph that is very controversial, and many more liberal.
It's not controversial if you're living in the Middle Ages.
I know. Well, I'm going to get there. Many like liberal Jewish synagogues today and liberal Jews in general are uncomfortable with this paragraph.
They're uncomfortable with everything. Okay, they live a life of uncomfortability. They're uncomfortable with
Let me get to it.
I mean, Vashti is their hero, so
they're uncomfortable with Vashti. They're uncomfortable with Esther. They're uncomfortable.
Listen, we have a lot of liberal Jews who listen who like to get our perspective on these things because they're only hearing the other perspective. But so there's a paragraph called Shafo Chamascha, and it's basically a call for revenge or vengeance, retribution against our enemies and people who wronged the Jewish people. First of all, what's the history of that? Why is it in the Haggadah? And second of all, the whole Haggadah is about freedom and I don't know, whatever. And all of a sudden we have this paragraph about vengeance. So tell us about it and why it's important.
So let's not forget, okay, we talked a lot about the idea of freedom, but the bottom line is that Pharaoh did oppress us.
Right.
I mean, let's not forget that. Yeah. I mean, it's very nice to think about substituting master for master and what I've said. But the bottom line is that Pharaoh did oppress us and did kill us and did subjugate us and all of these things. And it's happened to us over and over and over again in our history, whether it was the Egyptians or the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans and then the Christians and over and over again. So this is a moment in time where we celebrate our freedom. We also celebrate the idea of retribution for our enemies for what they've done to us. We're not talking about maybe physically annihilating them, but annihilating the idea of anti-Semitism. Pour your wrath against the people that are standing up against your beloved ones.
Right.
I mean, it's a prayer that makes perfect sense if you're sitting in the Middle Ages surrounded. Well, why do we open up the door for Elijah? Well, Elijah, like when he's taking a wagon around the world. I mean, we have to open up the door so Elijah could. The whole idea of opening up the doors because we're not afraid. Right. Tonight is Leil Shimurim. Tonight is a night of protection. God protected us when we got out of Egypt. God is going to protect us every Pesach night. So we're just going to show how we're going to show that we are so confident in our protection. We are going to actually open the door and say, look at us. We have an open door and we're not afraid of anybody. Here we go. Okay. Now quickly close the door. Okay?
Before we get embarrassed.
Before they wake up, before they come out of the bars.
That's true.
So close the door quickly, So to me, I have no problem with that. Is those people that are planning to hurt us, and are those people that have hurt us. Let retribution come upon them. Let them understand that anti-Semitism comes with a price.
Right.
You're going to be an anti-Semite, you're going to pay the price for being an anti-Semite. And this idea that we should be afraid to call upon God vengeance upon our enemies is just silly.
Yeah.
It's silly. Yeah. You know what? We know we don't have to prove that we are peace-loving people. We know that. We are not fighters. We never created an army in the 1800 years that we were in exile. We never fought a war. We're not people that like to fight. We are scholars. We are, nurturers. We're scientists. We're musicians. We're business people. We want to live and let live. But there comes a point in time where dayenu, enough is enough. So I have no problem with that. I mean, only someone that's uncertain and feels uncomfortable, which they feel uncomfortable at every twist and turn and every, everything. I can't help their uncomfortability. And, they're uncomfortable now after October 7th. They're still uncomfortable.
Right. No, that's a good answer. Good job. Mm-hmm. I was going to say the same thing.
And that was good advice.
Jade, go ahead. What do you want to ask?
No, go ahead.
I forgot my question. What is there? Okay, this is a very niche question, but let's just go for it. Okay. So we have a group chat with some friends, and today they got into a conversation about kitnius, which for those who don't know, so I feel bad because we're kind of doing we're all over the place, but you could go back and listen.
We still have two more podcasts before Pesach, so
whatever
we haven't covered now, we'll cover somewhere else.
So in a nutshell, obviously we know that you're not supposed to eat bread on Passover. We eat matzah, and so that extends to a lot of other food items that we avoid on Passover. But if you're Ashkenazi, it extends to a bunch of food that has nothing to do with bread. Things like corn, beans, lentils, peanuts, right? All of these things. Rice, we don't eat rice. And all of this is a custom, right? That came from Eastern Europe. And we know that because Sephardim, or Jews from the Mizrahi places, they do eat this stuff on Passover. So it's not wrong to eat it. It's just a custom. So in our group chat, Jay and I are with a bunch of friends in a chat, they got into a whole discussion today about it. And I'm curious because there is a push now for Ashkenazi Jews to rethink the commitment to, not eating kitnius on Passover. And I'm wondering if you could explain it a little bit and then what you think about it.
Well, the thing is, rabbis, since the beginning of time, have made what we call gzeras, prohibitions, decrees, when they felt a need to save the Jewish people from transgressing on certain, prohibitions.
Okay.
The most famous one maybe is the chicken. Chicken, maybe biblically is pareve. Now it's meat, because the rabbis have been given that authority. Now, historically, anything that was done before the Talmud was completed, let's say the year 500, that's incumbent upon everybody, because the Talmud is universal. Later on, because our community split into so many different pieces, the rabbis in particular locales did their thing. So if they saw, for example, that people were, transgressing or were moving towards something, they would make a decree. You could only make a prohibition. You can't be mater asurim. You can't permit something that's prohibited. You can't say, well, you know what? Well, because bacon is so prevalent in America, we're just going to say, hey, you know what? Bacon's okay.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
Oh.
We could only put an is.
You can add
a restriction. So, during the past few hundred years, rabbis obviously in Eastern Europe saw that there was a situation that was going on with they were grinding, these beans, and they were making them maybe into flour, and it was causing some kind of confusion. And people would say, hey, look, he's baking with flour on Pesach. So the rabbis got together and said, look, the easiest thing to do is let's for 8 days refrain from eating anything that could be substituted for flour. That's peanuts and corn and beans and legumes, whatever they did. And that became incumbent upon the Jews living in their locale.
Okay.
Now we transfer that over into the United States of America as Ashkenazim. If you're a true person that belongs to the Haredi community or to the religious community, even modern Orthodox, you're not going to be able to overturn that decree because it's a decree that's already been established within the community. Now, if someone doesn't like to do it, so don't do it. I mean, what am I going to say? I don't like to keep kidneys, so don't keep kidneys. I get this question. I mean, I give a class on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I have for 15 minutes at the end of every class asked the rabbi. This lady's asked me the same question every week. What about kidneys? Why is kidneys? What about kidneys? Maybe I'm Sephardi. Be Sephardi. Convert to Sephardiism. I mean, if it drives you crazy, so to the point where you can't refrain from eating rice for 8 days, go to eat rice.
I think she's missed the point of rabbi shopping. I think when you shop rabbis, you have to go to different rabbis.
Yeah,
you can't just ask the same rabbi over and over the same question.
No, it's funny, but it's something so. Again, if it's when you say there's a movement, to get rid of kidneys,
it's not in Chabad.
There's no movement. It's not a movement. I mean, there's 8 people that have decided in a group chat that we're maybe getting rid of kidneys. So there's 8 people. Like, there's Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin. A few other guys are sitting in a room and they're discussing how to get rid of kidneys. Good luck.
Okay.
Good luck. It's not only kidneys. I mean, if you start talking about taking off these prohibitions and these decrees, it came from in Judaism in the past 2,000 years. What about the second day of the holiday?
Right.
Yontif Sheni Shel Goliath. Why do we have to have 2 Seder's for?
Right.
It's not biblical.
Actually, someone mentioned that in the chat. Also,
biblical is one day. We have a calendar today.
Right.
So we're not confused. I mean, especially certainly about Shavuos. So Maimonides writes, why do we keep 2 days of Shavuos, even though we know when Shavuos is? Certainly, it's because not to differentiate between the 3 big holidays of Sukkot, Pesach and Shavuos. You have to keep uniform.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll fall into a problem. This is just something that you accept. Right. When you're in the Orthodox world, there's things that you're going to accept and follow.
I realize the theme.
And this is like the least of my kidneys. This is the least of my.
I think the theme of all my questions when it comes to observance of mitzvot is like, it's all really about convenience, and who says life has to be so convenient? I guess that's part of it. Like, I want everything to be easy and as minimal effort as possible that I have to put in.
What if the rabbis got together and said, you know what, they're right, and the people are right. Let's allow corn to be eaten. Would that make a big difference to you? Having a corn salad at the Seder? Say, finally, hooray, we won. We pressured the rabbis. They relented on the corn. And look at this, a delicious corn salad at our table.
I actually hate corn salad, so that's a really bad example.
You go. Or rice. Oh, look at this.
Rice would be good.
Rice.
I
have rice with my chicken. Oh, my goodness gracious. How lucky I am.
You know what corn is very good on though. Corn is very good on pizza. So if you had like some
corn on pizza.
That's your worst take ever.
No,
it's so good.
Jay.
It's so it is.
Say it ain't no, Jay.
Amazing.
Corn?
Amazing.
Wait, like canned corn or like
corn.
I'm a pineapple guy.
You think I put like a whole corn cob on a pizza? No, it's.
Did she actually ask that? Did she actually put the cob on? Yeah, they put the cob on.
That's not what I meant.
Together with the whole tomato.
Okay.
Potato.
Rabbi, I'm talking to you, Rabbi. I think ChayaLeah needs a break.
Yeah.
No, because the corn off of a cob is crunchy.
Yeah.
And canned corn is mushy. I don't like canned corn. I like it more off of. Never mind. Never mind.
I don't like canned
corn. For you, yes, we can cut it off the cob.
That would not work. As I mentioned,
never tried it.
I'm a pineapple guy.
I know.
I was.
Oh, that's awful.
But it's so good.
I was going to say that you could make matzah pizza with corn on it if you could have corn.
Oh my God.
But so that these again, you know what? In America, thank God, we have a lot of leisure time. We have extra time to just talk about ideas. In Eastern Europe, they were happy if they had a potato,
that's true,
a matzah, they had a little chicken, some soup, hurrays. They were happy.
Listen, go ahead.
In the secular world, they spend their time scrolling TikTok and Instagram. In the frum worlds, you spend your time worrying about if you can have
corn,
have rice and corn on Pesach.
Totally.
You know what's great about the internet? It's that even the Orthodox world now, like we were just watching a bunch of clips. A young Chabad guy started a TikTok account, and he makes these funny little clips, and they're so niche to like the Orthodox world, and he does the funniest little videos. But it just shows you the experience that we're all having is so similar. Like, you think you're an island and you're the only one experiencing this thing, and it turns out that everybody feels the same exact way, and we're all going through the same thing. And I don't know, I find it a little comforting to know that, because sometimes it feels like we are insane, but it can feel very isolating, and it's funny.
America's funny.
It's funny.
America is funny.
It's a great country, and it's a privilege to live over here.
Yeah.
But you know what? We worry about things like, maybe it's because I grew up with no kidneys that doesn't bug me. Like if all of a sudden I become religious and they said you can't eat rice on Pesach, I would I'd be more.
It's funny.
More defensive.
I'm kind of
about it. But
it's kind of embarrassing now to think about, because I hosted my in-laws for Pesach like maybe 5 or 6 years into our marriage, and it was only the second time in my in-laws' entire life, and they were married probably 45 years by then, that they had gone away for Pesach. So it was like a huge deal that they were coming to my house, and I had this thing that I wanted to use garlic. It's a Chabad custom not to cook with garlic on Pesach. And I got it in my head, I'm going to use garlic. There's no reason why you can't. I was obsessed with I need to use garlic. And I drove my father-in-law insane. I made him call Diane Roskin in London, who's like the head rabbi, and ask him why I couldn't use garlic. And my father-in-law was so uncomfortable. And he was like, well, the rabbi said, since you're starting your own traditions, it's not the worst thing to do, but it's not our tradition. And I was like so stupid about it. Like, why did I make such a big deal about the stupid garlic?
I don't know.
And I drove him crazy. I feel bad now. I'm embarrassed.
What's
the rationale for not using garlic?
There is none.
Oh, okay.
They just didn't use it.
They didn't use
it, so it just become okay. Well, now you don't use it.
We don't use any spices except for salt and white pepper. That's it for 8 days. I can't use paprika.
That's pretty much how I eat. So that'd be fun by me.
You should see Orthodox Jews on Passover. They literally fall loose to between 15 and 20 pounds because they don't eat anything.
Oh my God,
there's no spices. There's no kidneys. There's no matzo balls. They literally fall away. You should see them at the end of 8 days. They're literally starving. They should wear pajamas because that's what the people wore in Auschwitz.
Oh my God.
You could think this is a concentration camp. Oh, they barely subsist on 24 to 26,000 calories a day. between potatoes and the matzah and the chocolates and everything else that people are stuffing down their faces. But we can't eat rice. I need the rice. Help me with the rice. Corn.
Off the rails.
If only can have corn. I'm dying of hunger.
It's a Shonda. It's a Shonda.
I'm telling you should see them. I'm telling you, these poor individuals, these people.
You should probably listen to another podcast to get some inspiration about the holiday after this episode.
Well, we'll link to last year's episodes, so you'll have those.
We bring realism into it. We bring realism.
It's true. It is true. This is the reality. Listen, everybody should go to a Seder. There are Seders all over the world. Chabad hosts Seders in everywhere. City. They would love to have you. Don't be shy. If you don't have anybody to do it with, you don't have family, you don't have friends, you're just all alone by yourself. I'm sorry for you. But anyway, go to Chabad. Even if you have family, go to Chabad. Yes. They will open up their doors and you are welcome there. And you'll have a beautiful experience. And if you want to host your own Seder, and you have questions, I'm happy to answer. You can email us anytime.
Give them the website.
edJEWcation@gmail.com, or just send comments on our Substack or whatever. If you have any questions about recipes or how to do it, or you need links I'll try to link a bunch of different resources. But I'm happy to help anybody who wants to host a Seder for the first time. Happy to help you get through that.
Beautiful
event.
Awesome.
// ordeal.
If anybody can make heads or tails of that episode, good luck to you.
Let us know. All right.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.